Hi, I'm Jimmy Butler, and welcome to the Agile Digest, where we have right-sized topics covered in just minutes. Today's topic is around the Agile manifesto value of working software over comprehensive documentation. This one's about 6 minutes. Enjoy. In this digest, we're going to talk about the Agile manifesto value of working software over comprehensive documentation. The disclaimer is that while there is value in the item on the right, we value the item on the left more. We value getting to experiencing the software more than just having something to read about the software. What we don't want to do is spend months and months and months of detailed requirements and design specifications where all we can do is read about the software. We want to be able to put something out in front of the user so we can touch it, feel it, learn from it, and adjust. We want to experience the software. And so that's what we're going to talk about here. So let's talk about the working software aspect of this value. Because people use software, not documents. And so when I dig into the 12 principles of Agile that stem from the manifesto, I have 4 statements that I think relate to this. Our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. Early and continuous delivery. So we want to get something into the hands of users so that we can experience it, learn from it, and adjust, rather than try to guess all of the details up front through some comprehensive documentation. Number 2, working software is the primary measure of progress. Again, we've got to get something out there. What's the minimum amount of capability I can get out there that provides value? Something that works, that can get feedback. That's the measure of progress. Writing documents and comprehensive documentation is not progress. Delivering working software frequently, from a couple of weeks to a couple of months, with the preference on the shorter time scale. Again, we're not worried about trying to guess everything up front in some detailed document. We want to deliver something frequently so that we can get feedback on it and empirically grow it, learn from it, adjust. And then simplicity. The art of maximizing the amount of work not done is essential. And this is key too, because in traditional projects, we would get so wrapped up in defining so many details of requirements and design that we'd go off and build that it was oftentimes overkill and spending a lot of time on features that provide little value. So we want to think about what provides the biggest amount of value in the shortest amount of time. So we want to maximize the amount of work not done. Therefore, get something working out in front of the user, see if it's good enough, and if it's not, iterate on it. And at some point, you'll find a place where good enough is going to be a lot less complex and complicated than if you had tried to design it all up front through comprehensive documentation. Let's talk about the comprehensive documentation side of this statement. Now, some would say that Agile proposes that there is no documentation. Well, that's not true. Documentation is valuable and it's necessary. But the questions are, when is it required? At what level of detail, and that's key, and where should it live? And that's also a variation from our traditional mindsets. So I think with our traditional project documentation mindset is we create these huge documents that have all kinds of technical data and requirements data and drawings, and they all live in this big document or repository of documents or a binder somewhere. And it may not be the most appropriate place. It may not be the appropriate level of detail, because how often have you pulled out that 3-inch thick binder or that 50-page document from your document repository and read through it and quickly understood it? It's a mess. And so concepts to consider with documenting for Agile are, number 1, it's got to be barely sufficient. Barely sufficient means it's the right level of detail needed to know, first, what you're going to build, and then second, what you just built. You want to do your documentation just in time. There's no reason to do all this detailed requirements and design work of stuff you're not going to touch for 6 months or more, because 6 months from now you may not do that work if you're chasing value appropriately. So do the work just in time. Remember that a picture is worth 1,000 words. So if you can convey something in a sketch on a whiteboard and take a picture that shows the user flow through the system or the data flow through the system, or you can do a quick wireframe or mock-up online that shows how the user would interact, that's going to tell you a lot more than a bunch of words, tables, and things like that in a document. And then make sure you're putting your documentation in the most appropriate place. All of this stuff doesn't necessarily belong in one document somewhere. Sometimes you'll have documentation within the code. That's the most appropriate place for that particular audience. Some of your business flow might belong in a sketch or a drawing that might be put up on your SharePoint site, for example. That might be the most appropriate place for that audience. So consider what you're documenting and where the most appropriate place for it is, because if it's not referenced and used after you've developed your software, then why create it in the first place? So make sure it's valuable and make sure it's accessible. So in summary, remember that users value working product. They don't care about how much documentation you have. They want a product that works. And so let's start with minimum viable product. Get something in the hands of users that works, that meets the need in the minimum way possible to start with. Get feedback and iterate on that, so that you're not gold plating and you're creating more bells and whistles than what's ultimately going to be needed to solve the problem or meet the need. Think about prototypes, wireframes, and drawings, the things you can see and touch for your documentation. And then remember the empirical process of do something, experience it, learn from it, and adjust. And when you're working that way, creating detailed documentation up front would just mean you're constantly revising it. So again, you want to do the minimum amount, barely sufficient amount of documentation to be able to develop something, and then wait until you've delivered it to document what you've done. Well, that concludes this digest. I always welcome your feedback, so please email me at the email address on the screen. Thank you.